Thank you for joining us on behalf of the Alumni Association to our Summer Welcome Podcast Series. The purpose of this podcast is to welcome the class of 2020 to our alumni family and give them the best tips and tricks for living and working in various cities across the country. My name is Jessica Cantone, and I will be your moderator for this session. Today, we're going to cover New York City. I would like to thank all of our panelists for joining us. We know the experiences of our alumni that are here are valuable to share with the Bryant community. Every opportunity for alumni to exchange ideas strengthens and expands our Bryant network. Today, we are joined by Brittany Lashinsky, class of 2013, Gabby Rossi, class of 2012, Peyton Sadler, class of 2014, and Robert Harvey, class of 2010. Brittany, if you want to start, if you want to just kind of give us an intro and tell us your name, your class year, where you're currently living, and then if you're from somewhere else, so if you're not normally, originally from New York, feel free to say that. If you want to tell us what you're currently doing professionally, and then just since this was supposed to be an event for the class of 2020, if you just want to share a little congratulatory response to them.
My name is Brittany Lashinsky. I am the class of 2013. I currently live in Westchester County, just north of New York City, but I work in the city. I'm a lawyer and I work at Kirkland & Ellis, which is just a large national law firm. I'm originally from New York, so when I came after Bryan, I went to law school. I went to Brooklyn Law School. I really wanted to come back to New York, so that was one of the reasons I chose Brooklyn. And I lived in the city a little bit after. I lived in Brooklyn when I went to Brooklyn Law, and then when I started working, I lived in the Upper West Side in Manhattan, and then I moved to Westchester after that, and that's where I've been for the last couple of years. I'm really excited to talk to everyone in the class of 2020 today, and congratulations to everyone. This is such an exciting time. I know it's a little bit not, the traditional way you'd be going about this, but it's still super exciting that you guys have graduated and you're taking these next steps and, the first steps in your career journey. So best of luck.
Awesome. Thanks, Brittany. Robert, do you want to go next? Do you go by Rob or Robert?
I was fine. No, everything but Bob. Everything but Bob. Yeah.
All right. Robert, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Robert Harvey. I currently serve as superintendent of schools for East Harlem in New York City, a charter network of schools, as well as chief academic officer for a 3 academic program merger organization that does a teacher residency with Hunter College, out of school and after school time for about 2,000 DOE traditional students. And then we have our network of schools. So that's how I spend my life. After Bryant, I went to Harvard and did a dual degree in education and theology, and then finished up a PhD in leadership, culture, and society after that, and went into teaching for a while, but now obviously leading school network. So that was my life after Bryan. Originally from St. Louis, but has lived all over. So born and raised in St. Louis, but lived in Jersey and Louisville, Chicago, obviously Rhode Island, Massachusetts for a period of time, and Memphis, and now New York. So I moved to New York March of 2019. So I'm only about a year and 3 months in to my journey here. Yeah, and I similar to Brittany, I'd say congratulations to graduating in what has to be one of the most one-of-a-kind worlds to walk into as a new grad. But certainly an exciting time, because graduating in a moment like this, you also get to carve a path and you get to tell a story about your life that most folks cannot tell, which is that I went into the market this way. I'm a class of 2010, so we went into the market as it was recovering from the Great Recession. So that was kind of our own story to tell. And so for you all, take this journey, make it a part of who you are, your narrative, your identity, and use that as a way to really set yourself apart as you discover what you want to do by showing your resilience, season when all of us have had to be resilient in really unique ways. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Robert. That's good advice. All right, Gabby, do you want to go next?
My name is Gabriella Rossi. I graduated from Bryan in 2012. I currently live in Midtown Manhattan, and I work for a real estate development firm doing building operations for commercial and residential residential. And a very big congratulations to the class of 2020. I know it's not the most ideal time to graduate with everything that's going on, but resilience will make you stronger, and this will be a great learning opportunity for you. So just stick it out.
Awesome. That was perfect. Thank you. Peyton, if you want to go, name, class year, where you're living, where you're from, what do you do professionally, and then a little note to the class of 2020.
My name is Peyton Sadler. I graduated class of 2014. I did not do any sort of post-grad degree. I went right into marketing. I got a job in New York City and kind of spent a little bit of time in Westchester doing the commute for a little bit. Decided that was not for me and moved fully into the city. So I lived in Long Island City and with a couple of my friends from college, and then I moved out but stayed in Long Island City and have been enjoying the city there ever since. So I guess really quickly what I do is I work in advertising strategy. So I do a lot of planning of what do we want to say to our consumer? How do we want to reach them? What can we do to be a little more crazy and stand out? And that's kind of what I do. Not sure if I said it originally, but I'm originally from Connecticut. So it wasn't too much of a shift to go from Connecticut to New York, but being kind of from the middle of nowhere in Connecticut and then being in arguably the largest city in the world, it was definitely a big change, but it was really fun. And that being said, I'll let the other people give the good advice, and congratulations to the class of 2020. But I will say that you guys maybe have one of the toughest struggles, I think, as an immediate graduate of anybody that I've ever seen, potentially 2010 with the recession. But the real good part is it can only get better from here. And you're going to get started in your careers, you're going to get started in your life, and you're going to see growth and things that you've wanted and worked towards. You're going to see them start happening. And this road bump right at the beginning, it's much better to have now than maybe 10 years from now. So I think you guys will be well set to kind of pursue your dreams in the future.
Awesome. Thanks, Peyton. We were really hoping to kind of figure out, how did you get to where you are? It's good that we have kind of a range of class years, and so everybody's kind of on this different part of their journey professionally and life-wise. And so, we really wanted to hear a little bit about how you got to where you are today. I think for the class, as a few of you stated in your message to them, the class of 2020 is really struggling with, where do I start and how do I jump into the world? And I think that's normally an issue or something that the most recent class is a little bit scared about, but certainly now they're just a little bit concerned about, how am I ever going to get to the point where I want to be? And so if we can just talk a little bit about, how did you get, and I know a few of you already touched upon this, but if you want to go into a little bit more detail, how did you get to your current job? So what happened right after you graduated? Again, a few of you mentioned this already, but did you move to New York right away, or did you just get there? And, what other types of jobs did you try out before you found something you liked, or are you still trying to find something you like? That's fair too. So Robert, why don't we go to you first?
I think what is most important for me, and kind of when I talk to our high schoolers who are getting ready to go into college, is reminding themselves as they begin to ask those questions that life is not linear, and it does not have to be linear to be successful, right? Part of our programming works with students who are in college to help them persist and to graduate. And one of the biggest walls that we run up against is students who assume that after they get out, the job has to be in a field where the language matches their major, and the job has to be making in this particular salary band. And if the job doesn't fit this linear scope that they've created, then all of a sudden they're not walking in the right path for themselves. And so I think destroying the linear identity, and then secondly, killing the idea of a single story narrative, right? That there is one story that makes sense for finding and informing their life. Being willing to go where life invites them. So when I finished undergrad, I was in a really interesting place because I was going to go to either med school or go to school to study education, which was kind of funky. So I got into Dartmouth Medical and I got into Harvard School of Ed. And it was this interesting juxtaposition, right? I'm like, but I knew the core of it all was children. It was going to be pediatric medicine or it was going to be education. So it was only the two extremes. But in that kind of decision-making process, It was conversation with people who I trusted that helped to inform my journey. And so I think the third part for me is being open to what I like to call like the wisdom keepers, people who have already taken the journey. Allow them to like help guide how you're thinking about the work, not telling you what to do, but guide you by asking the right questions, pushing your thinking. When I knew I was going to Dartmouth, there were people who I had trusted that pushed my thought and helped me realize that my intention for going was not as clear as my intention for pursuing education, and how intention had to be a part of your journey. And so those would be my three: kill linear thinking, try to destroy the danger of a single story narrative, and trust people around you to push how you're thinking about your decision making to inform your journey.
I like that a lot. I think the first point you made, a lot of students come out and they say, oh, God, I have to work in marketing, and they start in marketing and they're like, I hate it. What am I doing? And then they think that everything was a waste, but it really wasn't. There can be a lot of things that you can do. So that's really helpful.
To speak to that really quickly, my major was sociology and finance. I'm nowhere near the two, right? Sociology-ish,
yeah.
But the finance piece I use with managing our district's budget. But other than that, I didn't pursue traditional finance. Right? Bryant is very much so a investment finance lane. I didn't pursue that lane at all to that point. That it's not as linear as I think we like to make it assume that it is.
Right. Good point. All right. Peyton, do you want to go next and just share with us how you got to where you are today? What did you do right after graduation? And, how, where are you kind of in your path?
Yeah, so I kind of actually did take the more linear approach into marketing. It's really rough at the beginning, I will say. Something that I learned very early on, I actually got connected to my first job right out of college through my good friend Gabby. And I started working at this company called Attention in a field that it was much more analytical based in social media. And I wanted to do much more like overall brand strategy and bigger thinking from an advertising perspective. And something that I really learned there is I am quite good with analytics and kind of seeing the entire business scope of things that I learned at Bryant, and being able to kind of pull that with me, gave it a lot of relevance of I don't need to look at just this one aspect of marketing to say if I want to do this, if I want to do that, and being able to kind of pull all of these pieces together to kind of move up and around the company that I was in, just to be able to grow. And that was something that I found out very quickly, that nobody goes into marketing for the luscious salary at the beginning. I think my first year in the city, I actually made negative $8,000 or something. So that was super fun. Go easy on your credit cards. Don't go out as much in the winter, stuff like that. It's little things. So kind of with that financial struggle, I started to learn that the industry itself is very much set up. So the younger people in the industry, they have to move around and they have to get different experiences at different companies, or else they're not going to progress as quickly as they want. And it's kind of a struggle in that sense of it, but it gives you the opportunity to learn a lot of different things. So I took my first position of being much more of an analytics and social media based person and turned that into a little bit more of an overall marketing strategist, which then turned into being more of a digital strategist, and now has gotten back to that overall marketing strategist. And I'm kind of 4 steps up in my career path now from when I started. And it's each had to kind of hopscotch around different companies, doing different things, meeting different people, being exposed to different types of thinking. I've worked at a company that was solely social media, and that was all they focused on. They didn't really care about anything else. I worked at another company that was solely digital, and they were really focused on kind of building apps and websites and integrating that into the company's overall marketing design, and then got into companies that are much more focused on the overall marketing suite that they have. So their TV ads, their events that they put on, their branding, everything that they have, and kind of bring it under one umbrella to see how it goes. So that, and the salary got better along the way. So eventually it all nets out and you're fine. But those first couple of years can be a struggle. So the most important thing that I figured out there was to just learn as much as I could from the people in my field, from my boss, from anybody that would be willing to teach me or just pull me aside, show me anything that they had. That was the most important thing for me for years. And then it started being a little bit more about salary and a little bit more balanced in that sense. And now I have fun. I have my office, I'm able to kind of lead my teams when I can, and it's been a great time.
Yeah, that's a really good example of when, even if you do go into the field that you had a major in, there can be many different aspects and many different companies that don't feel like they suit what you're looking for right away, but eventually you'll find something. All right, Brittany, do you want to share with us? And actually, you know what, I'll add, because I think it is really cool to hear if you want to share with us what you're doing now and how you got there, but also what was your major when you were at Bryant? I will often think it's great to hear how someone started in like journalism and became a fisherman, you know? There's always great stories behind that. So if you want to add to, you know, how you got to where you are and what you're doing, what was your major when you were in undergrad?
Yeah, so I double majored in economics and politics and law at Bryant. I knew from a very early age that I wanted to go to law school. I didn't know from the start what kind of law I wanted to do, and that thinking did evolve over the years, even throughout law school. I'll touch on that a little bit, you know, in keeping in the theme of thinking outside the box and not having to be linear, even if you are in a more linear career path. But so I majored in both of those, and I knew I wanted to go to law school, so I took the LSAT during my senior year at Bryant. And I also did the Washington Center program down in DC, and that was really great because I got to work for a solo practitioner down there for the semester in the fall of my senior year. So I did all that, and then, you know, once you get your LSAT scores, there's a whole like application process and everything. But then the following fall, I went right after Bryant. I started at Brooklyn Law. I moved to Brooklyn Heights, which is where the school is, like downtown Brooklyn Heights. Loved living there. It's an awesome area. It's just so fun. It's kind of its own little world, but you're also really close to Manhattan, so it was great. Living like near the school, I think for law school, people commute. I'm not trying to say you can't commute, but I personally really liked being so close to the school. And with that type of, it's very, depending on what you want to do in law school, it can be very heavily dependent on how you do your first year. So it really helped to be living close to campus, close to the library, and kind of be really immersed in that environment. So from there, I did my 3 years at Brooklyn Law. I started at a different firm than I'm at now, another large law firm. I went in as a general litigation associate, thinking at the time, I didn't really totally know what I wanted to do, but I just knew that I wanted to try out all the litigation work. And then in the past leading up to that, though, during my time at Brooklyn, I did do internships kind of in all different areas of law. I knew that was a time to really explore. And so when I was in DC, I worked for a solo practitioner that did personal injury law. And then when I was in law school, I did a couple of internships with insurance defense attorneys. I worked for a judge at the Court of International Trade for a semester. And I did a semester doing real estate work. So I kind of tried to get some different experience. Still didn't know totally what I wanted to do. So I went to the firm, started there as a general litigation associate, and still tried to do a bunch of different things. I started really liking antitrust work. So I got to do a little bit of that at that firm, but there wasn't enough of it for me to do all of that work there only. I was about 2 years in, and I knew I was like, okay, I really like doing this antitrust work. I don't really love this other work so much. So I decided I really wanted to just do antitrust 100%. And that's when I started my job search for my next firm. And I kind of went into my first firm thinking like, okay, this is the place. Like, I'm going to be here long term. I'm going to try and make partner. And then you really have to keep an open mind in any career field, because as I was there for a while, I started to realize it just wasn't the stuff that I wanted to do. I just couldn't do there long term. And that's okay. You know, there's plenty of other places to go. The large law firm model is built, you know, similarly to some of these other fields where, you know, you have to move around and they expect you to move around. The firms actually hire way more associates than they ever expect to make partner to stay at the firm long term, just because that's the model of you need people working and doing all the work at the bottom, and then you slowly trickle up. So it's okay to move, and it's very well known that that's kind of what you do. So it made it a little bit easier to think outside the box that way, knowing that like so many other people move. I had friends that I was close with at my prior firm that like encouraged me to move, even because they saw what I wanted to do and they were like, yeah, this isn't the place for it, go do it somewhere else. So I started looking. It took a while too to find my next firm, but then I interviewed at this firm. I totally loved it. I knew this is where I wanted to be, and so now I'm really happy here. I've been here since January of 2019, so it's been just over a year, and things have been really great. I think really when I was kind of going through that, I was at the end of that 2 years at my first firm, and I was really trying to think like, what do I want to do? I really wasn't having the best time at my first firm, because it's your first 2 years, I think, at any job, really hard. Going into the workforce in general is a really hard thing to do, and I think there's a much bigger learning curve than any of us anticipate when you go in. So I was definitely feeling a lot of that. I was feeling it sometimes, questioning like, do I even want to stay in law? Do I want to just totally go do something else in some other totally business area? And I think it was important for me to let myself have those questions and think about, okay, like, what would I do? Like, let's look into that. Is that something I really want to do? But also still keeping in mind, like, okay, I do want to do this other area of law. Let me think of maybe if I could do that somewhere. And just being open-minded is kind of what helped me find where I am today. And I'm really happy with it.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. It's interesting. I feel like the common theme is even after 4 years of college, a lot of us don't know what we want to do or what's the best fit for us. And, that might seem crazy because you just spent 4 years trying to figure that out and gain those skills and knowledge. But sometimes it does take a few different jobs at a few different companies, talking to other people. And like you said, Brittany, asking yourself those questions and being open to trying new things. That's what really gets you to the best part. So thank you. All right, Gabby, do you want to share kind of how you got to where you are, what you did right after you graduated, and what you studied when you were in undergrad? And you can talk about grad school too, if you want to go into that a little bit.
Sure. So I was a finance major at Bryant, and my senior year at Bryant, I interned at Scottrade in Providence, and I actually got that internship through my manager and the head stockbroker were both Bryant grads. So I worked there throughout senior year, and then I got an offer to work with Scottrade after graduation. They actually placed me back in my hometown in New Jersey, and that's where I got licensed and was working as a stockbroker for a little under a year until I realized that branch stockbroker life was not for me. And after that, I started job searching, and I wanted to do a little bit more with corporate finance and more budgeting, maybe more towards accounting or what you would study in accounting rather than financial services. So I got a job with an architecture firm in the city, and that's when I moved to New York. And I worked there for about 5 years doing corporate finance, project accounting, and operations management. And after that, I really wasn't learning anything anymore. And my biggest piece of advice is when you stop learning or when you stop having fun at a job, it might be the time to kind of start looking for your next step. So that's what I did. And at that point, I also decided that I wanted to go back to school in the near future. So I found a job, short stint of a job for about 3 months at a horrible firm. And that would be my plug for doing your research if you find a new job. Talk to current employees, talk to former employees, really understand the culture of where you're going into and what their goals are, and make sure that they align with where you see yourself going. That being said, that firm clearly wasn't a fit for me. So after 3 months, it was kind of kismet because I found myself at the firm I'm at now. And it's a real estate development firm in the city, and we're doing really cool projects. And I've always really enjoyed architecture and development, but I'm not creative enough to work on that side of it. So the operations and the finance team was perfect for me. Right now I'm working in business operations, and I've been there for 3 years. I also just graduated from NYU with my master's in management systems. So I'm hoping to kind of do a little bit of a pivot into human resources and HRIS systems within my current firm.
Awesome. Another really good example of thinking outside the box. You know your skill set, you know what you're good at, but you also have these interests. Like you were saying, maybe you're not going to be the lead architect at an architect firm, but it's still something you're interested in. Maybe pursue it. And there's lots of different roles within big companies.
And it's also kind of fun to be the one person or part of a small team that has a business sense in a firm like an architecture firm or a real estate firm when they're really interested and good at what they do and they're really not good at other things. So if you can kind of fill that hole with finance or accounting or your business background, it's really needed and you can be really valued at those types of firms.
Right. You can be the expert. Awesome. Thank you, guys. Well, next I wanted to talk a little bit about New York specifically. So if you want to just share what brought you to the city. So was it school or a job or moving back home? And what are some good tips? Peyton, you already shared some good tips about being careful with those credit cards, but some other tips that might be more unique to New York City. And if you want to share one of your favorite restaurants or bars that you like to go to, I know obviously with COVID, it's a little bit more unique, but maybe who's doing really awesome takeout right now. So let's talk more, New York City, where you're living, where you like to live, what brought you there, and what are some of the tips you have for hanging out in the city. So Peyton, if you want to go first.
Cool. So I have all kinds of random tidbits to throw into this section. I wanted to work in marketing, but I was between going to Boston, where all my friends were, and then to New York, where a couple of my friends were and my girlfriend at the time. And I chose New York, and career-wise, that's worked out very well. And it's also brought me much closer to my New York friends like Abby. And one of the big things that we figured out as a friend group, especially with a bunch of us trying to move to the city at the same time, is that it was very expensive. And like right off the bat, we were like, how do we do this? What do we do? And so we ended up taking a route where we didn't live in Manhattan. We lived in Queens, just over the river though, right on the water. And we ended up being able to move 4 of us into a high-rise building, and they let us divide up the rooms and the living rooms and everything into 4 bedrooms plus a living room. And they had washer and dryer and a whole full kitchen, and everything kind of worked out. So figuring out like that living situation dictated to us what area we wanted to live in. And then some of us have varying times moved out and moved away. But for the most part, like I've stayed in Long Island City the whole time, and I've really enjoyed it. It's the perfect balance for me in terms of how many people are there, how many buildings, how much traffic, how many areas, parks, things like that are like common areas that people can like hang out and kind of see. But it's got really nice restaurants, really nice bars, which is true of anywhere in New York City. So there's not really anywhere that you would miss that. That being said, there's perks about different areas. So like if you much more into baseball, maybe you do want to live in Queens and either go to the Mets, or you do want to live in Harlem or kind of Upper East Side or something, and you can go to the Yankees, things like that. Or you can live in Brooklyn and go see the Brooklyn Nets. Like whatever those types of things are, I gravitate towards sports. So that's kind of what comes up for me. But a lot of people are into kind of the architecture of the city and into the art and sciences and Broadway plays and things like that. So it's really just trying to navigate where you want to live in relation to like what you want to do. And I have some friends that wanted to just live really close to where they work so they can walk there. Other friends that wasn't really as big of a priority for them. Others wanted to live near a park or live near the water, things like that. And just kind of figuring that all out is a process to go through with like you and whoever you would want your roommates to be. Occasionally we've had to bring in some like random people, but for the most part, there's always people looking to live in New York City at any time of the year. So it's very easy to be able to just find somebody through like an app or website or something, and you can go and meet with them and kind of see if they are a normal person that you would want to live with. And you can just kind of figure everything out from there. So many other things to throw into the city. I think that's probably something in and of itself, is that there's so much to do on any given day other than like the last 4 months. It's really something that you can, on any given day of the week, you can go out to bars, you can go out to play, you can go see a game. There really is anything that you would want to do, you can do. And for the most part, a lot of people do a ton of stuff all the time. My like first 2 years out, I probably went out like 3, 4, 5 times a week, and slowly that went down a lot as it becomes physically hard to do such things. But you start seeing opportunities to do other things. There's new bars that you can go to on weekends. There's different types of activities that kind of pop up throughout the year that aren't available all the time. And you're like, oh, I can go do this, I can go do that. And just kind of finding those things is really exciting, really fun just to be a part of. So that would be my thing about New York City, is that find whatever type of thing that you need to city, whether that be living with roommates, being somebody's random roommate, or being able to like kind of move in with your friends. And maybe it's not the perfect living situation, but once you're in the city, it's much easier to kind of learn and see what you're looking for out of a living situation and out of like a lifestyle, be able to morph where you are and what you do to that perfectly.
Thanks. That's helpful. I know a lot of people, especially young alum, have reservations on moving somewhere, especially when it comes to figuring out housing. So that's really helpful advice. Robert, do you want to share a little bit about what brought you to New York and what are some of your favorite aspects of the city, maybe some of the areas that you've lived in or you currently live in, and the other tips or favorite spots you like to go to?
Yeah, I mean, what brought me to New York was work. Recruited here. I was in the South for 7 years and decided that my love-hate relationship with living in the South had come to an end, and I needed to be back in a city of progressivism. And so I made a really narrow list and was recruited here. So I live in Harlem, and I love living in Harlem because I'm a brownstone junkie. I love the history of brownstones. I only looked at brownstones. The circumstances of my move were really, really great, and my district was really, really kind to me. So I live alone in a beautiful brownstone. Yeah, I'm grateful for that journey. And I know that is an atypical journey, so I'll be really honest about that. It's been really, really, really good for me for that reason. I think Peyton hit on something that's super important, which was really being clear about what you want in your move here, and even what you want in your real estate. Like, I knew my absolute non-negotiables, things that were, I was not walking to do my laundry, right? I was not, like, there were just certain things that were just off the table for me. And so that helped to narrow down my focus area. So making a list of non-negotiables, I knew I needed to be near LaGuardia, because I fly out 6 or 7 times a month, right? And I did not want to ride. I could not fathom the idea of being in an Uber for 45 minutes to get home at a late night flight. So like I had to just be really pragmatic and practical about like some key decision points for me. And then lastly, I would say depending on where you are in your career for your journey, but even fresh out of undergrad, oftentimes there are many companies that are willing to support a move, even if it's like a relocation fee, or like for our organization, whether you are entry level or you are a senior manager, anybody who chooses to live in 3 particular zip codes where we have schools, we pay their deposit and their first month to live in these zip codes within Harlem, because we also just want people who know the community, right? So I walk to work, I'm 16 blocks from my office. And so I made this really strategic decision. So that cut down the need for Uber costs. I have a great bike. And so I think just being really pragmatic in a city like New York. And because everything has a price tag attached to it, even if it's a small amount, it adds up quickly in the city. And so the more pragmatic you can be with how you're spending, and the more you can cut down on those costs on the front end, like be proactive in cutting down those costs, the better. I am probably the polar opposite of a sport junkie to my friend Peyton. I couldn't tell you where any of the stadiums are, but I do know one is nearby because when the game is happening, there's always traffic on this little bridge right here that takes toward the border, and I'm often fighting that traffic. So for me, the pool was a lot of museums. So that was also strategic. So I live right by City Museum of New York. I can walk to the Met. I can hit National Black Theater Museum. So like that was really important to me because that was also going to be like my network of finding friends, because I love going out to museums. I love catching plays. And that's how I quickly build friends, is going to shows alone, because I didn't have a lot of friends in the city. And just meeting people, whoever I'm sitting next to became a friend. And like we were going to chat during intermission and make it work. And so it was also really strategic for me for community building, finding my people and the people who I know I like to hang out with, and situating myself in ways to be able to access them. And so like me, I think if you move into a city where you don't have a built-in network or you don't have friends, where you live is also such a critical decision to just building community and finding community. And so it was important for me to find that as well. That would be what I offer. I think to your question about where I like to go, I would say Harlem has done a great job in the COVID world when it comes to food. I have not missed a meal at any of my favorite spots, even in COVID, because a lot of the restaurants quickly converted into delivery. I have not missed a single favorite place. I will say Rayo's is high on my list. Ricardo's Steakhouse is high on my list. There's a cute little French restaurant in Harlem called Mountain Bird, which is super high on my list. Now you have to make a reservation like months in advance to Mountain Bird, but it's delicious once you get in. And then I love all these like random Thai spots that are just, they don't even look like restaurants. One of my favorite Thai spots is actually a vintage clothing store, but they cook in the back. And so like New York is cool for that kind of thing. I don't know if it's legal, but it works and it's good food, but it's also walkable, right? So I walk my avenue and I run into restaurants all the time. I just walk in the avenue. But those are my favorites and like my go-tos.
New York is great for lots of things, but especially having lots of different cuisines. So that's awesome, and walkable. So, and I loved your stories about meeting new people. We're going to get to that next, because that's really helpful advice for someone relocating to a city, whether you're doing it for a job later on after graduation or you're moving there within a couple of months. Gabby, do you want to share a little bit about how you got to New York and what's your favorite things to do, or what's your favorite part about living in the city and other good spots to check out?
Yes, absolutely. And I'm trying to put my 22-year-old cap on from when I first moved into the city. So my biggest piece of advice is budget. Figure out how much you're taking home, figure out how much you're going to want to spend out, and then work into how much you're going to be able to spend on rent. And then talk to your roommates, have a really open and honest conversation about how much you can spend. And my roommate and I found a neighborhood that was in our budget that way. We had some non-negotiables about an apartment building, what floor we wanted to live in. If all of those went out the window. At 22 years old, what we could afford was what we could afford. We lived on the Upper East Side, and we were lucky enough just to live near the 6th train, and that was kind of both of our goals. We just wanted to be near transportation so that we could both easily get to work. So I lived up there for 2 or 3 years, then I lived down in Gramercy. Once you start living in the city and you're making a little bit more money, then you can start bringing in those non-negotiables about where you live. So that's what we did as we continued to live in the city. We lived in Gramercy, and now we currently live in Kips Bay, and I, at 29 years old, finally got additional dishwasher and unit, and I'm just so excited about it. But in New York City, those are the kinds of things that you have to decide if you want a dishwasher or if you want to be close to a train, or if you want to live in Long Island City, then you can have your washer and dryer and unit. But just kind of having open and honest conversations with the people that you live in about your living budget, I think would be my number one piece of advice. As far as living in the city, I love the convenience of it, which I guess was one of my major things about when I was trying to figure out where I wanted to live. I wanted to be able to jump on a train and get to where I needed to be quickly. And I didn't at that point want to spend a ton of money on Ubers or taxis. Now I live within walking distance to work and I really enjoy it. And then anywhere else I need to go, I'd rather take a city bike because I'm just not a big subway gal. I think Peyton can tell you that. My favorite things about living in the city, I think Peyton would also tell you that I don't normally leave my neighborhood except for when I have to go to work. So I just learned to love my neighborhood and all of the different restaurants and bars around it. I've been going to the same bar for the past 8 years, and I think it's officially a Bryant bar now because I made them hang up a flag in the corner. It's called Falsha. It's a little divey Irish bar, and it's a mix between Renties and the Leak Cauldron from Harry Potter. And if you go in and you see that Bryant flag, they're going to make you feel welcome. The beer is cheap. It's always a good time. There's a pool table in the back. And I think that's just my favorite thing, living close enough to where I could walk to everything, having friends nearby, and kind of having my neighborhood spots that I just feel really at home at.
Awesome. Yeah, we need more of those Bryant bars. That's amazing. Nice watering holes for everyone to meet up at. And I love your advice about budgeting. I think when you first leave college, you want to hit the ground running and you want to try everything and you want to be as active as you were in college. And while you can do that, I think you can go a little bit overboard. I think the best advice someone gave me when I graduated was do not mess with student loans. You are at some point, whether you think you're going to want to or not, you're going to need a good credit score. You don't want to think about that when you're 22, but you can easily tank it for a long time if you don't pay your student loans. And then if you ever want to buy a house or do anything, you're set yourself up pretty poorly. So being honest and, like you said, having those open conversations with the people you want to live with is really important. Thanks for sharing that. And Brittany, do you want to share a little bit about what brought you to the city? Was it school or were there other things? Were you looking at schools just in New York? What do you like about New York? What are some of your favorite things to do? And what are some of your tips for someone who's thinking about moving to the city?
Yeah. So I knew I wanted to come back to New York, so I only looked at New York schools. I looked at kind of all the schools in New York City. When I went to Brooklyn, I walked in the doors there and really just felt like home when I went to Brooklyn Law. And so that was kind of like the deciding factor for me. I'm so happy that I went there and lived there. And Gabby's advice is totally spot on. You have to know yourself and you have to stay in your budget. And if you know that you're someone that needs a dishwasher, for me, that was a non-negotiable. So we lived in Brooklyn. And I'm glad we did because the one time we moved to the Upper West Side, we gave up the dishwasher and it was awful. For me, it was just, I couldn't do it. And we stayed 8 months and we broke our lease to get out. So definitely know yourself when you're thinking of these non-negotiables and be open to other areas like Long Island City and Brooklyn. It's seriously so close to the city and they all have their own communities too. Like I've been out to Long Island City and it's great out there. There's so many cool little bars and I've been to like an indoor rock climbing place out there. And then Brooklyn, where I lived in like the downtown Brooklyn Heights area, which is right over the Brooklyn Manhattan bridges. So it's literally the first stop out of Manhattan. So it's still just as close to the city and most things in the city as if you lived in Guy or if you lived, further up on, the upper part of the island. But there's also this whole other neighborhood down there that's amazing. You can go all the way down to Red Hook, which has some cool stuff. And then, there's Smith Street. It's like Smith and Atlantic Avenue. If you just go down Smith Street, there's like tons of really cool bars. And I know there's a Zombie Hut is a tiki themed bar, which is really fun. There's Camp, which is literally like a camp themed bar, and they do little s'mores kits. And then there's Clover Club, which is also a little bit of a fancier place, but it's like really cool inside, very vintagey looking. And it's just such a great neighborhood. And I'd recommend, even if you don't move down there, definitely just go down there one day and like walk into any of the places on Smith Street. And also Brooklyn Bridge Park is in that same area. It's right on the water and it's amazing. It's just like the coolest views of the city. I remember like the first night I moved into New York City, I moved into school housing and a bunch of us just went down to the park at night and it was just the coolest thing. It's got the best view of downtown. It was like, it's still my favorite view in the city, my favorite spot to go to in the city. So definitely check out the park. And then in terms of advice in general about moving to the city, I would say just be open to meeting new people in general. Like, I don't have specific advice on where to go to meet new people, but even if this is a homecoming for you, even be open to reconnecting with people that are in the city that maybe you went to high school with or something. So my fiance and I actually went to high school together, went our separate ways for college, didn't talk for 5 years between college or probably longer than that, between college and law school and everything. And then when I was starting my third year of law school, he messaged me on LinkedIn out of the blue, asked me if I needed a job because his bank that he worked at needed a new person in the legal department. And I was like, well, no, like at that point I already had my job committed. But I was like, hey, but do you want to get a drink and catch up? And I was at the time just thinking, oh, I'm graduating. I'm going to need to like make client connections one day. This guy's at a bank, so let me meet him. And we ended up going for drinks, and then we just kept seeing each other, and now we're engaged. So I just think it was really me forcing myself to be open to reconnecting with people and just trying to, wherever I could see an opportunity, just go for it. That actually led me to my fiance. So yeah, just be open to everything the city has to offer you. There's so much, like you've heard from everyone, and just embrace it. I had so much fun while I was there. Even though I don't live there anymore, I still love that I lived there. I lived there 5 years, and I would definitely recommend it to everyone, especially just graduating college and early in your career.
Awesome. Thank you. When someone's thinking about moving to a city, they a lot of times don't want to go somewhere if they don't know anyone there, if they don't have friends or family. And so what other ways did you meet new people when you moved to New York? Or, what advice do you have for meeting people?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So New York is my third or fourth city where I didn't know anybody before moving. So Memphis and Louisville were very similar. Yeah, so third. So just landed without knowing folks. Using my work community to build community was one thing for sure. It's a little tricky in certain organizations in terms of like the mix of power play that can happen at work and things like that. So that can get a little funky. I walk that line loosely, but I was very honest with people who I worked with about the kinds of things I enjoy doing, and asking them to introduce me to folks that they thought I might hit it off with, which was great. Social organizations are always a great way to meet folks and getting connected that way. I am deeply involved in my church, and so faith was a great way for me to meet folks and to connect with people. And like I said, I love going to shows and plays, and I can go alone. The only child in me can go alone and be just fine. And I also will talk to just about anyone under the sun, regardless of where I am. And that was a way to build community. Some of the people I am closest to were folks who I was like getting a city bike at the same time with and hit it off about how hot it was with us getting ready to ride down 3rd Avenue or whatever it was. And we exchanged information and stayed in contact, or going out to eat with folks. And then Peyton talked about the number of things that happen, or the number of things that are always happening. And that is critical for me. So if I see there's going to be like a pop-up festival, or there's a talk at the 92Y, which I love to go to randomly, or I see there are always these like random plays in Central Park or Marcus Garvey Park. Like putting yourself in the unknowns sometimes are a great way to just meet folks. And so those were always critical and helpful for me. And then lastly, when my family came in town, I would always use guests as an excuse to do something that I did not want to do by myself. So I would do just about anything alone. But the things I did not want to do, I made like cousins and family members do it. And we met people while we were out. And that was always helpful. Like I didn't want to go to Governor's Island alone. So when a bunch of cousins came in town, I forced them to go with me. Or like when the shed opened, I didn't want to go to the shed alone because I was still unclear what the shed was. I just knew it was a big structure that opened up and closed and they had things. So I forced people to do things with me who were guests as a way to meet new people. Then it was like a group meeting a group. It made it much easier that way. So those are just some of the ways. I think Brittany lists a number of great ones also.
Yeah, and that's helpful too for folks who may not be as extroverted and comfortable sitting next to someone and then just starting a conversation, putting yourself in those social situations. So yeah, maybe when you have guests, if you've got a cousin or old Bryant roommate that comes to visit you, going out that way or joining a group or something. So yeah. Awesome. Gabby, do you want to share a little bit about some tips for meeting new people or some ways that you might have met or stayed connected even with Bryant folks, but just ways that you find were helpful to you to kind of grow your network when you moved to New York?
Yeah, absolutely. So I always felt really connected to Brian. I loved my time there so much. So I knew that I wanted to continue to stay involved after graduation. So I joined the Bryant Alumni Network down in New York City, and I met a lot of great people through it. One of my best friends, Amanda, was the president at the time. So I just made a lot of great connections, both professionally and friendships, whilst I waited for my friends to move to the city because I kind of scammed them all into moving here. But other than that, you make friends through work, sitting at a communal lunch table and just chatting with people and asking them where they worked before, or, kind of just seeing what your mutual interests are. I've also made some friends. When I first moved to the city, I did NYC Social, which is a social sports league. I think there's that, and there's Zog Sports, which is a great way to meet people, especially because you can join leagues solo. So you can join a league and then meet a bunch of other people that more than likely just moved to the city and don't know that many people as well. And I'm not really an extroverted person, so those are pretty much the only ways I made friends, is putting myself in situations where I would have to talk to strangers, and also conning my friends to move here.
Yeah, it's helpful because I think being in a big city and being an introvert can be really scary. So knowing that, oh, well, you know what? I played intramural sports when I was in college. I'd love to play in a kickball league or something like that. It can be a really good way to meet people.
And also just always saying yes to things. I had a couple of friends from growing up that lived in the city, so I would hang out with them. And if they were going to drinks with their coworkers, I would always tag along. Or if they were doing something with a group of friends that they had already met, just saying that you're down to meet new people and try new things, you'll meet people through that as well. So just say yes to things, but try not to spend all your money doing that.
Good point. All right, Brittany, do you want to share a little bit about meeting new people and some tips you have for, anyone who doesn't really know anyone in the city?
Yeah, it's a little different for me because I did come here as part of like a school community. So when you come in and you're in that kind of program, it's easy to just make your friends that way and you don't really need to venture out too much. But even when I started working, I definitely have become really close with people at work. And I think it depends on the setup. And like Robert was mentioning before, sometimes it could be tricky depending on who you are that you work with. But like in my environment, there's a lot of people that are all same level as me, at the same age, same place in life as me. So a lot of us are really close. We talk all the time. Like I was on vacation 2 weeks ago and I was still talking to the other associate I work with all the time just about random life stuff. And then last week she was on vacation and we still talked every day. So I think if you're in an environment like that, where there's a lot of people that are around your age and at your level, being open to just being like friendly with them and even just talking about life, it's okay to talk about life stuff at work, I think. And it really helps you build friendships with people too that are in a similar environment as you. So that's my plug for work friends.
That's really helpful too, especially if you find, like, when I first started in my job, there weren't a lot of people that were my age. And so it's tough for me to like share stories and things like that. So I definitely was one of those, as soon as someone else got hired that was my age, like, you're going to be my new work friend and we're going to share. And up until that point, I was like, I guess I'm just not really going to have friends at work. And that was kind of discouraging. Or even to that point, I think I have seen a lot of people who make friends at work that aren't necessarily their age. It's a little bit harder because you might be in different parts of your life at that point, but finding someone who has similar interests to you can be really nice and a nice way to kind of de-stress and talk about work things with someone who actually is going through something similar.
Even the people who are, there's like partners that are, they're younger, they've just made partner, they're also really friendly. And so they're not necessarily, they're like, like 8 years older than I am, but they're still super friendly too. So I think, just being open to kind of the people you're working with, the environment you're in, and just kind of embracing it is a good way to at least have some sort of, they're not going to be friends you like go out with on the weekends necessarily, but to have some people to like socialize with at least during the week.
Good point. All right, Peyton, do you want to just share a little bit about meeting new people, advice or tips that you have?
Yeah, so I kind of went through like 3 categories of that. The first was the existing friendships that you already have. So like whenever Gabby would invite us to go do anything, it was like important to like actually show up, because it's like, okay, like we'll go and we'll meet Gabby's friends and then we have more friends. And so we met Gabby's roommate the first week that we all moved to the city, and 7 years later she no longer hates us, she just like dislikes us a little bit. So it's like if you just show up to things, like you're bound to meet people and kind of see that. And then on the other side of where I met people, a lot of it was through work. My first job, I was very quickly kind of asking like, oh, is there like a work soccer team or any sort of other like sports team that they had? And they had a soccer team, and I had no idea who anybody was. And I just emailed the guy who was running it and said, hey, just joined the company, heard you guys maybe have a soccer team, like could I join? And I've been on that team for almost 7 years now. And just kind of like meeting some of those people. And then I joined their other team that's just all men's league, and it's a lot of people my age and things like that. But I golf with those guys now. Some of them lived in Long Island City, so like we would meet up for drinks or watch games together, things like that. And it was just a friendship that I would never have had if I'd never asked even just somebody any sort of direction at my first job. And then the other thing is also through coworkers of like just figuring out kind of who are the people that are kind of similar to you, especially like when I was 22 and just out of college, and our whole company would go out. We were only like 40 people, but we would all go out for drinks like on every other Thursday or something. And very quickly you'd see the people that are older than you, that are parents, like they'll talk to you for a little bit, but then they have to leave because they have grown-up things to do. But then slowly throughout the night, it dwindles down to like the people that are younger, very much similar to you in terms of like kind of mindset and lifestyle. So it's like that starts developing, and before you know it, you have good friends at work then. And then that kind of expands out, and you can, again, go to all of these things that we've talked about, whether it's plays or shows or movies or games, like whatever it is, or just to happy hours. You can have like a group that you can kind of just like extend an invite to, or they'll extend you an invite and say, hey, and that gets you into their friends groups, that gets you into kind of like a work community, that it's much better to be in that community where you can be social at work and you can know people, and it just makes everything so much smoother. And then that builds and ladders up into even more social activity down the line. So those are kind of my 3 areas of finding your own friends, finding some sort of like shared experience that you can base a friendship around, whether that is how I found it through playing soccer with my work friends, or just signing up for a league. Like I've also done that and met people. Like you never know who you're going to meet and become friends with. So as long as you give yourself opportunities for that, it'll work. And then finally, just if anybody invites you anywhere, go, especially if it's like coworkers and after work, that just smooths over and builds like a whole new type of relationship, and it's perfect. So highly recommend that.
Yeah, definitely. And I like your advice about using your friends to meet their friends. So that can be a really good network to tap into. They're already established and you already like this one person, chances are you're probably going to get along well with their friends. So tapping into that network can be good.
One more thing, and similar to what Gabby mentioned about how she conned us all into going there, one thing that we do every year up until this year was we invite a ton of our friends down to visit, whether it's from Boston, Connecticut, people we graduated with, and anybody that wants to come generally can come. The first year we had like 45 people in our apartment, and like wow. 20 of them actually stayed in our apartment. And it was, and ever since then, like every year that's our summer party, and there's like 20, 25 people. And so they'll come down, but they'll also know people that maybe we don't know from Bryant, or that we don't really like, or whatever. But they drag it kind of everybody together, and we get to like meet and hang out, and it just kind of builds your directory of people, and you're able to kind of expand with every person you meet. So that works as well.
I love the mini reunions.
And I would say if you don't really know that many people from Bryant that maybe graduated from your year when you moved down here, get on LinkedIn and message one of us, or kind of talk to other people that you see are in New York and ask them to grab a drink and see if you can make a connection that way.
Yeah, that's a good point, Gabby. And it's a good segue to my last question to you guys is, again, I know you already touched on it, Gabby, about the regional network in New York and getting involved. But how else would you share that you've utilized your Bryant network, whether it's friends, whether it's someone you were in a program with at Bryant, or faculty member or mentor? What are some of the ways that you've utilized your Bryant network, either right off the bat or now you've come back to it after being out for 8 years, and how do you stay connected with Bryant?
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, being a part of RAN has been really helpful, especially during my time in New York. It's helped me stay connected to Bryant, both in New York and also what's still happening on campus, especially when they have an event where they bring down a professor. It's great to keep in touch with them. And that's how I was able to get my grad school recommendation letters and things like that. So just kind of keeping in the know of what's going on campus. But at every place that I've ever worked, I've always either searched the directory to see if somebody was a Bryant grad. At my current company, I had a great conversation and ended up getting a couple of good intros because she was a Bryant grad. We had coffee together, and I think she graduated like 20 years before me, but she was so happy to sit down and talk about Bryan and what was going on campus and kind of our shared experiences, even though there was a gap there. I've just kind of found everywhere that I go, when you talk about Bryant, there's this common bond. And it doesn't matter when they graduated or how far away their gap is. Everybody kind of has this common like for campus and their experience there, and they want to talk about it, and they want to talk about the glory days. So, just kind of reach out to them and see what their experiences are and see what they're currently doing. That would be my advice. Just reach out, say that you're from Bryant, and see how it goes from there.
That's perfect. Peyton, do you want to go next? Share a little bit about how you've stayed connected with Bryan, maybe some of the ways, you talked about a little bit already, but some of the ways you've utilized your network when you first got out to New York City or how you utilize it now.
Yeah, so when I first got here, I was able to get my job through networking, mainly with Gabby, who connected me to a company that had a Bryant grad that she knew that worked there, and then another Bryant grad, who I think was your year. Just kind of having that connection there, it made the whole process a little bit less stressful. And it was cool to be able to know like, oh, okay, so I at least sort of know one person at this company, and kind of getting that introduction and getting that networking experience. I would have never have known about that job if I was just looking for it on my own. So being able to kind of talk to Gabby specifically, but really just somebody who's in the city, and even if they can't help you like directly at their job, maybe they can connect you to different companies or different alumni, just to be able to kind of spread your wings and your reach a little bit. And that's been very helpful. And then much more on the personal side of things, I have found like a lot of my friends through Bryant that I stay in contact with, and my closest friends. And that's been something that is not replaceable. So even just having some sort of little memory of that type of relationship being something that sparks newer relationships. So whether it is meeting other Bryant grads or meeting friends of Bryant grads and kind of like being able to connect over Bryant a little bit has been very fun. And I find it very, I guess soothing is the wrong word, but I think it's like really cool to be able to kind of have those shared experiences. And again, how we have our party where we invite a lot of Bryant people from our years, we have slowly seen they are inviting people from their years, and we're meeting new people, and we're seeing people that were freshmen when we were seniors. They've graduated and they are in the city, and we're like, oh, remember blah, blah, blah time where we were at your house for whatever event or social or something or other. And just kind of like being able to kind of fall back on that and kind of hear some of their stories and being able to kind of marry it with some of ours. It's been really cool. And I think it is very helpful to leverage and lean into that network. And then back to the professional side of things, like anytime that I've been looking for a job or wanting to get a new job or even been looking for advice in my career field, it's been very easy to look at like a company that I would want to go to or see like a position that I would want to apply for and see those connections just kind of pop up with like, you have 4 people that work at this company that are connected through Bryant University, or you have 2 connections that are this type of role already. Like you can talk to them and kind of learn a little bit about how they got there, what it's like, and that's been very helpful as well.
It's true. It is comforting to meet or to talk with people who also went to your school. And it also presents a fun opportunity to, like you said, you reminisce with those stories. But when you're meeting someone new who hasn't heard that story before because they weren't there, it's so much more fun to tell it again. And then they have their stories. And it's really fun to, reunite and talk about that. But again, I think professionally, you have some good advice utilizing your network, starting with the people like you said, you knew Gabby, but she had her own network and you could utilize that as well. So you don't have to cold call everyone on LinkedIn who went to Bryant. You can start with people who you know directly and see who they know. But LinkedIn can be really helpful to try to figure out, like Gabby was saying, who at my company or who at the company I want to work at also went to Bryant. That can be a good way in or good foot in the door. Great. Brittany, do you want to share a little bit about using your Bryant network, what you found helpful or who you've stayed connected with since you graduated?
So along the same lines, kind of the professional side, I actually had contacted a Bryan alum that was when I was interviewing for the job at my current firm. I really wanted the job. I knew like this was it. If I got it, I'm accepting it hands down. And I don't even know how I found her. I can't remember if I looked on like the firm website and was able to search for Bryant, or if I looked on LinkedIn. But I found out somehow that somebody who had graduated a year before me was actually, like, she had worked a couple of years between law school. And so she was, also a junior associate at this firm that I was going to interview at. She was in the DC office and I was interviewing in New York, but I knew that the group that I wanted to go into that I was interviewing with works with DC too. So I messaged her and I was like, hey, do you know anybody like in the office that works in that group? Or do you know anything about these people? Like, I'm interviewing with them. And I had kind of like known her a little bit from a distance, but I, wasn't like close friends or anything with her. And she like gave me such great advice. She happened to know people that worked in the group in the DC office and connected me with them. And then I got to chat with them before I even had any interviews at my firm. They gave me some really good tips and gave me some great insight. And it even really helped make my decision and make me more confident in my decision, because then I was able to talk to people kind of off the record about the company. So along the lines what Gabby was mentioning earlier about making sure you really know the culture of where you're going. That was something I was really worried about with this move, just in general being, like a move. And so I was able to talk to people, totally outside the interview process that really did give me a very honest opinion about the firm and, how they felt about it. And that was really invaluable in making the move. And so I'd say that's like the biggest way. And then also staying in touch with the regional alumni network and going to those events, which it's sad that we can't have any of those events right now, but it's always fun to see everyone there and meet the new alumni and, hear what's going on at campus. So I think just the regional alumni network is great though. So for any of you that are starting work in the city soon, hopefully we can start having those events at some point and, we can all meet in person.
We miss them too. But even reaching out and having a coffee date with someone is still doable. I think one of the ways that we try to set people up is go to this welcome reception and meet new people, and hopefully you'll be able to have a private conversation down the road, because the welcome receptions are usually, there's a lot going on. You're mostly just talking with the people that you already know, and it's a kind of a mini reunion, but hopefully you met someone new that you start a connection with. So we definitely hope that there are still connections being made, obviously in a safe and socially distant way, but it can still happen, and we hope that it does. And that's really why we're so appreciative of you guys doing this. I think there is a lot of really good advice to hear, and especially for someone who's about to move to New York or they're on the fence about where to go, we're hoping that this will help them feel welcome and feel comfortable with their decision and know that there's Bryant folks all over the world that they can depend on. So really appreciate your advice tonight and all of your fun stories.
I was just going to say, you said coffee dates, but even now, take advantage of virtual coffee dates. That's the advice I've been giving when people have been reaching out to me. If you don't have a job yet and you're kind of in that awkward phase and maybe you don't know what you want to do yet and you don't have an offer yet, so many people are at home and they're in front of their computers. Send them a note and ask them if, they want to do a virtual coffee, send them a $5 virtual Starbucks gift card or do something like that, and just meet people that way. And you don't have to be in New York to meet them. So now to kind of just take advantage of this virtual situation that we're in right now.
That's a good point. I think now more than ever, people are comfortable doing that, whereas before they may be a little more reluctant to do such a thing. So yeah, that's a great point. If, maybe you moved back home and you're trying to build this network, but you're still back home, virtual dates can be really great. So again, want to say thank you, and we appreciate it taking the time to do this, and we're really looking forward to when we can all be together again and actually cheers each other in person. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening. Stay safe.
Thank you.